Hello, I'm Jay Barlow. I'm very happy to join you today in this special session dedicated to our friend Tom Norris. Today I'm going to talk about the use of an autonomous towed hydrophone system to detect beaked whales and other cetaceans in the waters of the Southern Ocean. My co-authors today are Ted Cheeseman, shown here, and Jenny Trickey. Like most of us who do towed hydrophone work, Tom Norris had a love-hate relationship with towed hydrophones. As you can see here, he looks much happier when he's throwing a sonobuoy in the water than when he's analyzing acoustic data at sea. We love towed hydrophones for what they can give us. Coupled with visual sighting surveys, towed hydrophones can give us visually validated sound libraries for acoustic species identification studies. They can often detect many more cetaceans than are seen on visual sighting surveys, and thus increase the sample size for biopsy, photo ID, and other such interactive studies. Towed hydrophones can also be used to estimate the number of submerged cetaceans missed by the visual observer team. And for a few species, like sperm whales, towed arrays of hydrophones have been used to estimate cetacean density and abundance. But we also hate towed hydrophone surveys. Equipment breakdowns are all too common and are extremely frustrating. Specialized equipment is needed, for instance, conducting tow cables, suitable winches, computers, signal conditioners, A to D converters, etc. And this complication leads to breakdowns. Specialized survey personnel are required to keep a towed acoustic system working effectively during a long survey. And the personnel required to monitor an acoustic system adds costs and extra berths, which may be a limiting factor on some research vessels. But what if we could simplify towed acoustic systems and still get most of the benefits without most of the costs? Today I'm going to be talking about that towed autonomous hydrophone system. It consists of a sound trap recorder. This is a single channel sound trap in this case. Inside, a flooded towfish. Here you can see my co-author Ted Cheeseman deploying it from one of our research vessels, the Pelagic Australis. You can see the sound trap here. It's in a self-flooding tube, and it's towed behind the ship with 360 meters of Dyneema tow line, a bit of weight to keep it down. It tows at about 4 to 6 meters depth when the ship's at a speed of less than 8 knots. The data I'm going to talk about today were collected by Ted Cheeseman on 2 of his expeditions to the Antarctic. One from the Falkland Islands to the South Sandwich Islands and South Georgia, and another one from King George Island to the Antarctic Peninsula and back up to Chile. Our analyses of these data concentrated on odontocete echolocation signals. We used a semi-automated analysis approach with PAMGuard software. We used PAMGuard to automatically detect impulsive signals and to classify those based on peak frequency. We used the click template classifier module within PAMGuard to further classify the signals based on waveform correlation with idealized signals. And then we used a human classification based on 2 expert analysts, myself and Jenny Trickey. And we looked at all of the data, and we came to an agreement between ourselves on what species was present or what pulse type was represented in each of the click events. Here you see some examples on the left of some of the beaked whale pulse types that we identified in going through these data. So the column on the far left would be the waveform of the echolocation pulse. In the middle is a Wigner transformation of that waveform into frequency space, and on the right is the frequency spectrum of each of the individual clicks. What you can see is that the beaked whale echolocation pulses typically have this upswept characteristic in the Wigner representation of them. Most of our beaked whale detections were southern bottlenose whales. These are signals that were previously described as BW29. They had a peak frequency of 29 kilohertz, but now they've been strongly associated with being southern bottlenose whale. We had 11 of those. We had 2 acoustic detections of Arnaud's beaked whale. One of those matched a sighting on these expeditions. We had 2 previously described beaked whale pulse types that were identified in our data, the BW 37/2039, which we think is one species, and BW 58, which we believe is another species of Mesolpodon. And then we identified and characterized 2 new echolocation pulse types, both also likely to be Mesolpodon species in the southern oceans. Here you can see the geographic distribution of those beaked whale acoustic detections. On the left panel, the yellow dots represent the BW29 or southern bottlenose whale detections. They were by far the most common detections. As I said, we had 11 of those. Most of them were seen on the Sandwich Island trip, but we had 1 detection midway between the peninsula and Chile. The green represent Arnaud's beaked whale. One of them was detected where we saw an Arnaud's beaked whale in the Gerlach Strait. The other was detected south of the South Sandwich Islands. And finally, we had 1 sperm whale. On the right panel, you can see the locations where the other beaked whale types were found. These are species that we think are probably Mesolpodon species. Here you see the locations of the other odontocetes acoustic detections that we had. The yellow represent narrowband high-frequency species. There were 30 of those detections. We can't be sure what species most of them are, but one of them corresponded to a sighting of hourglass dolphins. The other genera that produce narrowband high-frequency signals include Phocina, Lagonorhynchus, Cephalorhynchus, and Kogia. But based on the distributions here, we think that most, if not all of them, are likely to be hourglass dolphins. We also had 4 acoustic detections of killer whales and 3 of long-finned pilot whales. As with traditional towed hydrophone surveys that use conducting cable, there are benefits and costs of autonomous towed hydrophone surveys. The biggest advantage is that the equipment is smaller and cheaper. Surveys can be done without dedicated acoustic personnel on a not-to-interfere basis on vessels of opportunity. However, this system does not provide real-time feedback on acoustic detection. A really exciting example of a vessel of opportunity is shown here. Erden Eruch, a world record holder for long-distance rowing, is going to tow one of our autonomous towed hydrophone systems from California to China, starting in May of 2021. Of course, what we used in the Antarctic wasn't really an array. It was simply a single towed hydrophone. So the next step is to incorporate an array into one of these flooded tubes. You can replace that single hydrophone system with a towed linear array. Here I show a Soundtrap 4300 recorder with 2 hydrophone elements with an array separation of 50 centimeters. The big advantage here is that angles from a sound source or to a sound source can be estimated from the time difference of arrival of the signal on the two different hydrophones. And for impulsive signals, these angles can be very accurately estimated with just 50 centimeters of hydrophone separation. These angles provide important contextual cues to discriminate between cetaceans and other signals. For instance, propeller cavitation and other ship noise is all going to be coming from ahead of the array, so you can set up PAM guard so it completely ignores impulsive signals that are coming from within, say, 20 degrees of the nose of the array. These angles are also very important for estimating distances to detections. Using the time varying angle, you can actually estimate where the animals are relative to the array and thereby allow the use of density estimation using distance sampling methodologies. There's one message I'd like you to take home, and that is that autonomous towed hydrophone surveys can provide most of the benefits without most of the cost of traditional towed hydrophone surveys. I want to thank all those who helped, and I want to thank you for your attention.